child, anything and everything seems possible. But the challenge is hanging on to that as you grow up. And for me as a child, my goal was to sail around the world. I had the chance to sail for the first time, aged 4 years, and I could not forget the incredible sense of freedom that I felt when those sails filled with wind for that first time. It changed my life. But I was a girl who grew up in Derbyshire, as far away from the sea as you can get in the UK. I didn't go to a particularly good school, who certainly didn't say, when you grow up, Ellen, you will sail around the world. So like many young people, I thought, if I'm going to do this, I need to go out, get a job, earn some money, and then maybe one day I can afford a boat that I can sail around the world on. So I tried to be a vet. I started my education, I took the relevant subjects. For 3 years, I helped out at the vets every single Saturday to gain the experience to help me to get into university. And then my mock exam results came, and I was 1 grade short, and the school said, don't bother applying, Ellen, you're just not clever enough. For many young people, that's a door slammed in their face. But for me, it made me really think. It made me really think, what do I really want to do? And I went back to that first love, that sailing around the world. And when I left school aged 17, I began the impossible journey of trying to find a sponsor with whom I could sail around the world. So imagine how it felt, just 5 years after I'd been saving my school dinner money for my first boat, to be sitting in a design meeting with some of the best boat designers in the world, designing a boat on which I would sail around the world. I couldn't believe that I was living my life. I couldn't believe that it was real, and the first time I sailed her in Auckland Harbour, I felt I was absolutely in heaven. And that race, the Vendée Globe, was everything I've dreamt of, everything I'd hoped. To sail on 60-foot mountains sparkling under the moonlit sky in the Southern Ocean, to see 10 icebergs in one day, the albatross that fly behind the boat, the isolation. It was absolutely extraordinary. Every day you're living, 24 hours, you don't miss a minute. It's not like the day on land when you're awake and at night you switch off. You never, ever switch off on a boat that's sailing around the world, and you feel unbelievably connected to everything that happens around you. Every single thing is your decision, apart from the weather. And it was very, very different at the finish. Because from the age of 4, that goal for me had been to sail around the world. It was everything. It was that thing I was trying to make happen. And the moment that gun fired at the finish line, yes, I'd finished second, but the dream was over. The dream had gone. And at the time when you crave your family to wrap their arms around you and the familiarity of life to be there, it wasn't. Because when you sail around the world, you want to sail around the world, and you don't realize that you're going to lose your anonymity. And you don't realize how precious that anonymity is until you've lost it. And this photo, taken 30 minutes after I stepped off the boat, doesn't show an elated Ellen who just sailed around the world. It shows fear. Fear at the fact that my life had changed forever. And for me, normal life was more at sea than it was on land. To be out there in the middle of the ocean was where I felt more me. And so within months of that moment, I set out to try and be the fastest person ever to sail solo non-stop around the world. The record stood at 93 days at the time. And this needed a different craft, a different boat. This is B&Q, a 75-foot trimaran. She'd probably just about fit in this room. Her mast is 100 foot high, and they're different animals. They don't have a big lump of lead underneath the boat that makes them come back the right way up again. They sail faster, and that speed brings danger. It's like driving a car. The faster you drive, the more adrenaline flows through your body. And the faster you drive, the more dangerous that journey is. And these things are like thoroughbred racehorses. They're very wet. This was a training session before I left. They're also quite tippy. And you see the figures hanging from those nets on the right-hand side, you realize actually just how far down the water is, and that's in daylight. There's just as much chance that that could happen alone in the middle of the ocean at night. And when you're in the middle of the ocean sailing around the world, you're 2,500 miles away from the nearest town. And I was on this boat, not going around the world, but training. There were 5 of us on board. We were only 60 miles offshore. And that boat flipped in 5 seconds. We hit something on the rudder. I was inside getting something to eat. 5 seconds later, the boat was upside down and our world went black because all the windows go underwater. And I nearly lost one of my best friends during that episode. So you realize 5 seconds is all it takes, and that could happen at any time, day or night, during the 71 days it takes to sail around the world. If your batteries go flat because they drive the autopilot, 5 seconds later, you're upside down. It's as simple as that. So you manage the resources you have on the boat so carefully. Your battery voltage is like your heartbeat. You manage your sleep, you manage your energy. You try and sleep. You sleep 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes half an hour, occasionally 1 hour, very rarely 2 hours, and only once during 71 days did I sleep for 3 hours in a row, just once, coming back up the Atlantic. So you live in an entirely different world, and you manage everything you have so carefully because you know that what you have on that boat is all you have. If you run out, there is no more. And what I didn't expect to learn during that record-breaking journey was resources, to understand about resources, because what I learned on that boat was the true definition of the word finite. And never did I connect that to life on land until I stepped off the boat at the finish. I learned our world is no different. We have finite resources available to us. And in a way, it was like lifting up a stone, not meaning to, and seeing something underneath it. And you have two choices. You either put that stone back down and carry on with your dream job of sailing around the world, which is what my head was telling me to do. I loved it. I had no wish at all to stop that sailing. Or you put it to one side, you follow your heart, and you learn more about this subject. Resources, how do we use them in the world? I chose the latter. And I began a journey of 5 years speaking to experts from government, scientists, teachers, young people, everyone from CEOs to government officials, to try and understand, how do we use resources? How much of things do we use? How does our world function? Energy was an obvious one. Oil. Oil is relevant to all our lives. And the first report I picked up was in 2008, the Independent Energy Agency report, saying that we could run out of oil within my lifetime. That was quite surprising. Something we use for everything. But it's not just with regards to oil, it's also coal, probably lighting this stage here in London today. Coal is vital to the way we run in this country. This photograph was taken in a coal-fired power station, 180 feet tall, goes to 2,000 degrees when it's lit. These guys were fixing the boiler pipes that take the steam that drive the turbines. We stood on the roof of this power station. You can imagine how high it was. We saw a massive mountain of coal next to it. I asked Gary, who showed us round, how much coal's there? About 1 million tons, he said. It was a mountain. I did the calculation when I left. That would run the UK for about a day. And what struck me was just how fast we go through this stuff that we ultimately know is finite. And I guess you could argue coal is not a finite resource because it is renewable, but 290 million years is a long time to wait for the next batch. And coal is something close to my family, as it probably is for many of us. I came from a mining area. My great-grandfather was from a mining town, and he spent 50 years of his life underground, 50 years mining that black stuff. And when you see that photo of him, you think that's from another time, from another era. That's not today. But this is me with my great-grandfather. And by the way, they are not his real ears. I remember sitting on his knee. He talked of his mining stories when he was working with the pit ponies underground, the fact that miners would save the crust of their sandwiches to give to the ponies that had retired that lived round the mouth of the pit. He talked about the camaraderie. For me, it was like it was yesterday. And on this journey of learning, I stumbled across something called the World Coal Association. Here's the website. There in the center of the page, it said 118 years. Now, admittedly, 118 years is not within my lifetime, but my great-grandfather was born 118 years ago today. It's nothing. It's a snip in time. And it made me realize just how important our futures are, and it made me make that decision that I never ever thought I would make in my life, and that was to leave competitive sailing behind me, to focus on a much greater challenge, our futures. But it's not just energy, it's also materials. Materials are also finite. Think about the statistics. 2008, the New Scientist brought out a review. They said 13 years of indium in the screens of all of these computers, mobile phones, watches. 61 for copper, 40 for tin, 59 for uranium. These materials we only have once. But it's not just the fact that they're finite, it's the speed that we're using them. For years, we had a fairly constant use. And then since the Second World War, that use has spiked. And that graph isn't about the numbers. That graph's showing a trend. And that trend is getting faster and faster and faster. And that's making the prices of these materials get higher and higher and higher. And those prices become more volatile in a world where we are so dependent on them. For everything from hospitals to education, from transport to our own health. It's fundamental to the way we function. And you can see that's a linear economy where we take something, we make something out of it, and then at the end of its life, we throw it away. But A, there is no away. And the second question you ask is, so if we're beginning to bump up against these limits, because we're using things up rather than just using them, then what do we do about that? And our current solution was to use less. To use less, to be more careful with the resources that we have, to take a bit less out of the ground, to make a bit more out of it, and then to throw a bit less away. But even if we do that extremely well, with a population that's increasing and a use of materials that's increasing, we're never going to solve it. All we're doing is buying ourselves more time, and we end up exactly here, but just a little bit later on. And what message is that for the next generation? If the goal in their life is to do as little as possible, to use as little as possible, to travel as little as possible, what can they actually do? What is their goal? What are they trying to aim for? Is that something that's going to inspire them, as I felt inspired as a child when I had that goal to sail around the world? I wanted to sail around the world. I had no idea how I was going to get there, but I knew exactly where I was going. And it was only with that vision that I could make it reality. So what's our message to these young people? We have a systemic problem in the way we use our resources. And what that needs is a systemic solution. It's not a tinkering around the edges to make our products a little bit more efficient. It's to actually redesign an entire system. And one suggestion for that is the circular economy. It's a different way of looking at the way we design things. It's not recycling, whereby we recycle materials, because recycling is where you deal with a problem at the end of its life. It's designing out waste through intention, designing things in an entirely different way. Imagine an industrial carpet tile that is designed to be made again. So that carpet tile could be leased. It goes out to its user. The user uses it. At the end of the life of that carpet tile, it goes back to the manufacturer, where it's deconstructed. The base of the carpet gets melted down and becomes the base of the next carpet. The yarn gets depolymerized, repolymerized, and becomes the yarn for the next carpet. And if that manufacturer does that using entirely renewable energy, that manufacturer can function in the same way in 1,000 years. And not only that, but they know their costs for the next 25 years. Now that's not an imagine, that's real, because our offices and thousands of offices around the world have those carpet tiles that can be made now. This is innovation at its peak, but it's creativity. It's thinking differently. The first line on the design brief for those designers was, we want this carpet to be made again. Design for disassembly. We need to be able to recover the materials. Think about a plastic bag at the moment. In education, I think even when I was at school, they were bad. Plastic bags sat under hedges and they lasted forever and they never disappeared and they were litter. They were thrown away. But we have no away. So how about turning that into something positive? Think about young people who see that in an entirely different way, because they don't see the problem with the bag because we need the bag. They redesign it so it's biologically non-toxic, totally biodegradable, as could be all our supermarket packaging, as could be all our food waste, as could be all our human waste, which could enter a different system, a biological cycle, which could provide fertilizer for farms all over the world, which we desperately need, because fertilizer comes either from fossil fuels or phosphorus, which is dug from holes in the ground. Both are finite resources. So you're changing the entire system. When you think about a systems level change, think about Detroit. Detroit is a system which is not functioning, it's dysfunctional. Do you redesign Detroit so that it can run on renewable energy, or do you redesign the whole system? Think about the automotive industry. Do we buy a car or do we buy road miles? Should the first line on a manufacturer's design brief be, we need to design this car for disassembly. We need to be able to recover all the materials so we can make the next car out of it. Then the business model changes. You end up with millions of different options for innovation for young people, through economics, through design, through materials science. It changes the whole paradigm. Think about a washing machine. Do you buy a washing machine or do you buy 3,000 washes? If you buy 3,000 washes, you'll have a machine which is more reliable, better built, can be repaired, and you have a relationship with the manufacturer. It works for everyone. It's a different way of looking at things. So when we launched Ellen MacArthur Foundation 18 months ago with a goal to inspire a generation to rethink, redesign, and build a positive future, we did that using the coherent framework of a circular economy, giving those young people a framework throughout which they could be innovative and creative, moving towards a system that can work in the long term. And it works. They see opportunities. They see a million things that they can do. They don't see what they can't. It's about opportunity, innovation, and showing them pathways of things that work. And it is a huge challenge to redesign our entire infrastructure across the world. But it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to get things right. And when I think of big challenges, and I think of what's possible, just what can we achieve, I think about what we can achieve in a lifetime. When my great-grandfather was born, there were 25 cars on the road in the world. Now there are 600 million. When he was 10 years old, we flew for the first time in history. And today, 3 times the population of the world back then fly every single year, accessible to everyone. When he was 45, we built the first computer, and many said it wouldn't catch on. But it did. And 20 years later, when he was 65, it had become a microchip, of which there'll be thousands of in this very room here today. 10 years before he died, we had the first mobile phones. They weren't that portable, but now they are. And there are 5 billion across the world, and we can communicate like never before. But as my great-grandfather left this world, the internet arrived. If ever there is a time when we can share ideas and share innovations and share creativity, it is right now. If ever there's a time that we can rethink, redesign, and build a positive future, it's right now. But if you're going to change things, you need to know what you're going to change them to. You need to change by intention towards a system that can work in the long term. And I'd like to leave you with a line from some of our work in education. We'd been working within design and technology, and one of the students who was going through his exams at 18-year-olds, his second set of exams, went up to his teacher and he said, "Sir, in my first exams, I couldn't think of anything to design. But now having learned about the circular economy, everything I see, I want to redesign." Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Inspiring, and I love the way that you link that to your own personal experience on when you were sailing. I know that people love to take questions here, so we're going to take a couple of questions from the audience. Well, microphones are at the back. Who would like to ask the first question of Ellen, please? Lady at the front, please. Microphone's coming. If you just introduce yourself and your name. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm Bernadette. I'm from NACE, the ICT Association. That was phenomenal, and thank you. Privileged to be here. Ellen, I know that you do an enormous amount of work with DATA, the Design and Technology Association, to support their work. And I just really recognise there's a worldwide audience here, but very keen to understand how you think we can make this system-wide change, how we can have the microcosm here in England to develop your ideas and concepts with our present political leaders.
Well, first of all, this isn't my idea. The circular economy is not something that I dreamt up. It comes from a range of different experts who've been looking at this for a long time. But we brought this together as a concept of the circular economy to inspire a generation. They need to understand the basis of what this is, of what this different framework could look like. And we do a lot of work with Design and Technology Association. We work with A-level chemistry. We're working with higher education. We're working with businesses across Europe now, in fact, much further afield. And this, although the UK has the opportunity and the potential to kick this all off, which is where the foundation's based, it's where our team is based, I think this is also a global challenge. And it needs to be appreciated as a global challenge. It's also a huge opportunity for developing countries who have the potential to leapfrog our linear system to a system that can work in the long term. I think that's quite important. And I think when we think of education today, we think about young people going through school, going through university. Many will study in other countries. Many will work in other countries. We live in a very globalized society. And I think having that thought through an entire generation, starting here in the UK for us, but it has to spread further afield, that there is a different way of doing things, and having our link with business that's saying we absolutely need a generation of young people to leave education with different skills. And our founding partners don't just come from the UK, they're European companies, some are global companies. And so there is this real need for a generation of young people to see things differently. You know, our education was a result of the Industrial Revolution. The next step of education needs to be something quite different because we need a different paradigm. But there is one, and it does work, and it's proved from an economic perspective. And I think that's absolutely vital. Is, you know, the case is there, the materials are getting more expensive, they're becoming more and more volatile. There is a different way to do things. So that provides jobs, it provides ability for young people to be creative, and it's about the more you can do, the better, not the least you can do, the better.
Thank you, Ellen. I know you have to be leaving us shortly to go to take this message to the World Economic Forum. in Davos, which is running in competition with us today. But I think we should send Ellen on with our applause and thanks for this presentation and our goodwill to take with you to Davos. Thank you.